Sam Darnold is an MVP candidate. 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 Sam Darnold is an MVP candidate.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast. We're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate y'all so very much. Thank you so much for coming in, tuning in every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you first play $5. Today's Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions as sent to me on all of the various flying animal apps. Or you can send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, or you can always fill out the Google form in the show notes to any episode if you prefer that. The first question comes from Skull Tom, who asks, do you think Darnold has a realistic chance at winning MVP this season? Obviously, there's two versions of this question. There's will he and should he, right? The should he question is probably the one people want to debate more. The will he question, if you go to FanDuel right now, his odds are plus 4,000. He's sixth in MVP odds. He's behind Saquon Barkley. Josh Allen is a runaway favorite right now to win MVP. So realistic chance, hard, probably not. But should he is the question, I think, is that people really are going to sit there and debate. And I think you can absolutely make an argument for Sam Darnold. There are a few things running against him when it comes to MVP that are pretty hard to surmount. I don't think you need Sam Darnold to be MVP to validate what he has done for the Vikings this year. But I think you can argue that he should be part of a conversation. Give me one vote. Give me one MVP vote. I'll be very, very happy. But here's the deal, right? Sam Darnold has been the central source of this vibe of the Vikings that they're better than they were supposed to be, right? And the key, the middle of that, the core of that, is Sam Darnold being better than he was supposed to be. And I think that sort of makes you feel like he's now the lifeblood of the Vikings. He is the lifeblood of the Vikings. He's become that. Here's the thing. It's a popularity contest. It's a popularity contest, okay? Maybe it shouldn't be a popularity contest, but it's a popularity contest. And the Bills are more popular, the Lions are more popular. Like Jared Goff, Josh Allen, they have a better chance. The novelty, the fun idea of making it Saquon Barkley is tempting to people. Like, all of these people are ahead in odds for a reason. I think for more sensible arguments, like, none of those guys have Justin Jefferson, and I think it's just going to be hard for anyone to win MVP when the best receiver in the league is on your team, because like the idea of MVP is a guy that is, doing it by himself, that is elevating everybody around him. And you can always make the argument, well, yeah, but he has Justin Jefferson. It's going to temper anything you say about Sam Darnold. But who cares? He's doing great and we love him very much. It's fine. But at the end of the day, you need the hype, you need the PR, you need the national attention. And that just hasn't gone to the Vikings. I mean, up until like 3 weeks ago, people were still looking at Chicago as a team with like a brighter future. It's just what the Vikings are right now. They just are not in they're one of the have-nots in the eyes of many, and until, I don't know, they wake up and look at the NFC standings. But anyways, next question comes from Rock NHL. And I got a whole bunch of different versions of this question, and there's kind of a bunch of different angles, so I'll talk about it for a while. But the question is, do you think a tag and trade for Darnold is a realistic scenario? It's kind of a branch off of the question I got a whole bunch, which was, really, the Vikings are really going to let him walk? Some version of that. I woke up to texts after the game, because I'm sure people caught up on the Vikings game and are like, whoa, this dude did good. And then I'm fielding this one, okay? So I'll reiterate, and this is kind of what I've been saying all year, and what has been reported by Adam Schefter now, but Trey Wingo had it last week, and we've been talking about it all year, which is that the Vikings are going to let Sam Darnold walk. That has kind of been decided, and in terms of a contract negotiation, there's a bunch of discourse on this too. Again, there's two separate questions, right? There's, will the Vikings want this? And hey, sure, if Sam Darnold wants to come back and play this level of football for $10 million again, I'm sure they would slam that button all they want. But that's not really the way this works. Sam Darnold will be much more expensive, and he will want long-term security. He is not going to take a one-year bridge deal because he's not going to have to take a one-year bridge deal. Somebody on this market is going to give him tens of millions of dollars. Call it 40. I'm not very good at projecting contracts. We'll call it 40. And it'll probably be a multi-year deal with a lot of that money guaranteed. Like I could see Sam Darnold raking in $60 million guaranteed, all in escrow, all good to go. He's going to get it. The Vikings won't do that. They've got J.J. McCarthy in the wings. Even if they want to buy into another year of Sam Darnold, they're not going to buy into a long-term thing of Sam Darnold and then waste all of J.J. McCarthy's rookie contract going with Sam Darnold. That would essentially be giving up on J.J. McCarthy. And I reiterate, they love this guy. It's not a matter of guessing for them anymore. They aren't seeing him as a projection. He's a real person in the building that they love, that they're ready to go behind. They've seen enough, and that might be surprising because they've only seen him for like 3 weeks of camp, but they have. That's where we're at. That's just what it is. The question Rock NHL asked is, what about a tag and trade? So there's a couple of reasons that make this hard to pull off. I think the dream is that, you apply the tag to Sam Darnold, you trade him off, you get a better draft pick than like the comp pick that he would walk for. I don't know if that's true. I think if Sam Darnold walks and he gives you a third round compensatory pick, obviously assuming that you don't go out and get a whole bunch of free agents and cancel it out or whatever, but a third round compensatory pick a year delayed, if you sign Sam Darnold to a 1 year, $45 million deal, that now puts a wrench in what his new team is going to be able to negotiate with him. So if it's up to a team, they don't want to be a part of this. And the under the table reality is teams are going to be talking to his agent, and they're going to be talking to probably Vikings brass at the combine, maybe the owners meeting in like February or whenever that happens, before the franchise tag deadline. Right? So they're going to have a sense, at least, Darnold especially, will have a sense at least for what kind of deal they're probably going to go out and get. And they're probably going to have a sense for the market and what compensatory picks are going to come back. So they'll be able to make that decision. But it's going to be really hard because you don't get to be in the rooms where Sam Darnold's agent is talking to like the Titans. So it's going to be really hard to do any kind of negotiating with Darnold himself about that. Of course, it's the franchise tag, so he doesn't have to do anything like that. You can just trade him right out. But if, let's say it's the Titans, it could be a whole bunch of teams, but let's just say it's the Titans. If the Titans are now going to trade with you, well, now that kind of means that Darnold has to be in on those conversations just logistically, because now the contract negotiation between the Titans and Sam Darnold's camp has to include the franchise tag year, which the Titans don't like. So they're going to give you less, and they're going to want him to hit free agency. So they're not going to offer you more than a compensatory pick would be anyways. I know it's a lot of weird ways to say that, like, I don't think teams play ball with you on that. And also, just on a personal standpoint, the Vikings have a great relationship with Sam Darnold. Their brass likes Sam Darnold. Everybody in that building loves Sam Darnold. I don't know if they want to do that to him. That's bad for Sam Darnold. I don't know if they want to do that to him. Everybody's probably going to prefer this situation if Sam Darnold just hits the open market and has an honest-to-God bidding war free agency period. And good luck to him for that. And everybody's okay with that. Again, I need to be clear. There's never been animosity about that, and there's never been anything other than that understanding. So good for them. But a tag and trade, I get the idea of that, but I don't think that the way that these things tend to work out, I don't think enough parties are on board with that for it to be a feasible idea. And if you do tag him and then other teams are like, well, we're not doing this for the $45 million tag anymore, and you're just stuck with that cap hit, you got a lot of egg on your face. But they'll have a sense by the owners meeting in the combine. They'll have a sense for what kind of market they're looking for and how feasible that idea is. And then they're going to know. They're not going to be guessing in the dark about this. They can talk to people about it, even if they're not necessarily supposed to. James Kunow asks, okay, there's a bunch of O-line questions actually coming up, and I want to make sure that I get to as much of this mailbag as possible. So we are going to continue on in just a second. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by IceShaker. There are these lovely little workout bottles they're like a thermos. They keep everything hot or cold, whichever you're doing today. But they were made by the Gronkowski brothers for specifically as like for like protein shakes or whatever, where you've got like a powder in there and you want to break it up. They have this agitator, which is also, it looks to me like it would do pretty good on a lemon if you wanted to use it as like a juicer and like put a cocktail in here or something like that. I don't know. I'm not the cops. You do whatever you want. But whatever it is, they actually now just got licensed to do like NFL logos and stuff, or you can even do your own custom logos, like your company's logo or something like that, if you're into that kind of thing. They're kitchen grade stainless steel bottles. They won't absorb odor. They keep everything. They will hold ice for 30 or more hours. So order your team branded bottles today at IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off of your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. IceShakers. This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the best place to play daily fantasy football. And do you guys remember in September when Prize Picks had this like Caleb Williams thing going on where if you got half a passing yard, you could like put that in your lineup and then you could essentially have like, you know, 4 players in your lineup, even though you only really had 3 picks. They're doing that again. They're just letting you have that again. I cannot stress enough how insane this is. You have to get in. It's Picksmas. You got to get in on it. So go on over to Prize Picks. Whether you think that, you know, Travis Kelce will get more than 70 yards or something like that, or Justin Jefferson will get more than his is usually at like 89.5. Whatever it is, download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Moving on here with Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast. If you potentially had a question about Jalen Redmond after that game, he showed up a lot. Was that real? What was the deal? My dude actually started. Like Jerry Tillery, who he replaced, and Jerry Tillery had like 2 drives, like had as much run as like Patrick Jones would, or like Dallas Turner replacing Andrew Van Ginkel, except Van Ginkel was hurt, so Turner played a little more. But like Jerry Tillery was like a 2 and Jalen Redmond was a 1 in terms of like usage. And so I went in and watched how he did, and you can go find that at patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. But let's get back to questions y'all actually asked. And the next one comes from James Kunow, who asks, seems like the OL has been shakier than normal the last few games. Especially glaring since neither the Falcons nor the Cardinals are known for having good pass rushes. Have there been any changes in how they call protections or slides that may explain this, or is this just a matter of poor individual performance? If I wanted to be really charitable, I would say this is because a couple people have changed and that the communication and chemistry isn't the same. Cam Robinson obviously replacing Christian Darrisaw, Dalton Reisner replacing Ed Ingram, and they're not quite on the same page as they were, which is sort of to be expected when you start like fiddling with the O-line, whether you have to or not. But I think that probably would be overly charitable. I think Blake Brandel's just taking a lot of L's. Reisner's taking some L's. I think Bradbury kind of had a day to forget. And both the tackles, I think Cam Robinson's been pretty good. The next question, or one of the other questions in this was about how good you think Cam Robinson is. Came from Mario, who asked, how would you rate Cam Robinson's performance so far as a Viking? And then with the amount of cap space the team will have in 2025 and Darrisaw's recovery, possibly going into the regular season, could a case be made to re-sign him and then move him to guard? That's a much different question. I'll put a pin in that. But I think Cam Robinson has been fantastic. He was I think he might have been the best lineman on the field against the Cardinals. Not so great. There's a couple of plays that bugged me in the Falcons game, but nothing super catastrophic to write home about. I think Cam Robinson's been a good quality tackle. The interior obviously has had its problems. Brandel's been up and down. Bradbury's been a little more up, but still up and down. And then you obviously got the situation at right guard. I've covered a lot. But for the second part, well, to finish out with James Kunow's question, so some of it has been, I passed that guy off to you and you didn't pick him up. One of the first sack, I think, of the game happened that way, where Bradbury passed him off to Brandel and Brandel wasn't looking. And that's just communication. Either Bradbury has to know that Brandel is looking to help Cam Robinson instead, and he has to know not to pass him off, or Brandel has to know that guy's coming. Those two have to work it out amongst themselves. Whoever's fault it is, those guys have to just have that conversation, and they probably did on the sideline. But then there were a couple of the sacks that also came were running backs. Aaron Jones took an L and gave up a sack. Cam Akers took an L and gave up a sack. I think both to the same guy, to Caden Ellis. So sometimes it's on the tertiary guys too. But the Vikings have also been blitzed a lot, and teams are realizing, oh, these guys love to hold the ball and run 20-yard routes. Okay, let's send 7. And like that kind of works. So like that's part of it too. Okay, so to the second part of Mario's question about possibly re-signing Cam Robinson and moving him to guard. Again, why would he say yes to that? Because I don't think that makes as much money as a team that just wants him to be their left tackle, which I think he's very much 100% good enough to earn. Somebody will just want that. And that makes more money than a tackle being moved inside to guard. So I don't know if he says yes to that. And I'm also always a little bit wary to like career tackles moving positions. And at guard, you don't necessarily want to be as tall. That's a big difference between tackles and guards, that like we can't just take tackles and slide them inside. Because if you're like 6'8", your center of gravity is actually doing more harm than good to you sometimes from like a leverage perspective. Obviously you have that length and you can play a different sort of game. And this is actually what's happening with Blake Brandel right now. He is a taller guard and sometimes guys get under him, you know? So there's other things about that make me kind of bristle. But mostly it's just, I don't think we need to think that hard. I think we just let Cam Robinson go be a tackle somewhere else and he makes money. He gets a comp pick too. Vikings looking great on the comp formula right now. Maybe Razzie asks, it's time to stop running away, Luke. Reisner or Ingram? Answer or perish? Gun to my head, I'm going Ingram. And here's the reason. I've explained this in detail in previous episodes. I have a Patreon on it that's now free to watch. I wrote a big article on it. So however you want to get the detail on this, if you're a video watcher, or an article reader, or a podcast listener, it is there for you. But I'll give you the spark notes. The way Ingram loses when he loses his pass pro reps is more consistently easy to overcome than the way Reisner loses. When Ingram loses, usually it's because he threw his outside arm too fast, it got defeated, and now somebody's coming up that B gap. He turns his hips, he gets himself flipped around, he tries to wash you past the quarterback. For Darnold, one little sidestep and you're golden. With Reisner, he gets walked back, but not in the same way that when it happens to like Garrett Bradbury, who's smaller, sometimes a big guy will walk you back. He does the hop technique. He can usually anchor and he just uses a lot of space. Reisner doesn't do that hop. He just tries to get like one strong foot and almost like get it to the side. And that makes it really easy to sort of finish you by moving to the side or whatever. And it's not if that guy is going to kind of finish you and get to your inside or your outside, it's not consistent which one. So Darnold can't predictably do a sidestep to one side or the other. He kind of just has to scramble and run and just get away from that whole situation. I think it's a little bit more damaging. And I don't think that there's too much of a difference in terms of how often it happens. And by the way, Ingram's better in run blocking. And I think pretty much everybody agrees on that. So it's Ingram for me. I've got a few more questions I want to make sure I get to. There's some really fascinating ones you guys asked. And you guys are going to get me going way too long on all of these, so we'll get to it. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 on anything and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So if you have a problem with Sam Darnold not getting MVP, and maybe you want to put $5 on Josh Allen at -450. You're not going to get a lot on that $5, but you will get $150 in bonus bets, assuming Josh Allen actually is the MVP. Or if you get a hunch in the middle of game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Everything in one place to help you make those sort of live betting, feel out the moment decisions. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Moving right along here with the Locked On Vikings podcast. Next question comes from Kyle Omdvet, who asks, Byron Murphy Jr. has been an interception machine this year, but wanted to get your thoughts on his play overall, and with a very thin CB room going into next year, should he be a top priority to re-sign? Yeah, he really should. I think keeping continuity somewhere in that room is the only way to sort of get a foothold back on the cornerback room. The Vikings have not had a foothold on cornerback since Xavier Rhodes left. They have cycled through all the Bashad Breelans in the world, and some of them have worked and some of them haven't. And Patrick Petersons and all of these sort of rental type players have bridged over until the next year. But because draft picks like Andrew Booth and a Caleb Evans didn't work out, and you're not getting anything from a Kai Blackman right now, hopefully he can return and give you something. But it's still dreadfully thin, even if you assume that. But to get that to work, you need a stable presence in place that can sort of be the pillar of that room that you then bring people in. And then Byron Murphy's the guy you ask all the questions to. And he's the guy that knows how to do things. And he's the guy that knows what Brian Flores wants. And he becomes like the quintessential Flores corner. I think you need to have somebody be that guy, and I think Byron Murphy's a great candidate for it. He has played awesome. Look, the corners in the Flores system don't have the same difficulty of assignment as corners in some other systems. They're not man covering all day. They're doing it a little more because they trust them, but they're not man covering all day. They're doing a lot of, playing cover 2. They're going back and playing half safety, but they're doing zone responsibilities a lot. And it's more about accuracy of where you place yourself and about, timing and reaction. It's not a sleepwalk job, but it's not, you got to cover Jamar Chase man to man, right? That's a different level of difficulty. But with all that said, Byron Murphy has done what he has been asked to do very consistently, very well all year long. I think the Vikings would be absolutely fools to let him walk. Mac asks, Addison's second and third scores seem to be variations on the same route. Can you explain those plays? Is that a choice route, or is KOC mixing it up with two similar looking play calls? So, Mac, you're going to get me going. So the two concepts, I believe, were choice out and flag. That's the names for them. I'm going to hit you with jargon. Don't worry about memorizing it. But choice out was the first one, the pylon diver from Jordan Addison. And for him, he is just running a speed out. I think you run to 4 or 5 yards, you cut it out open and you round that thing off. You don't want to stop and cut. You round that thing off. You just want to get going laterally as quickly as possible. So round that thing off. And then there's a corner route above it, and you're hoping you get a high-low over there on somebody. There's 2 routes going at the sideline, and you're hoping you can cut someone in half. The other concept is called stick China, or it's called stick China in the Vikings playbook. I've been referring to them as return routes, loops, pivots is another very common word for it. But all it is you make it look like you're running stick, which is just, again, it's like a little 4 yard. It's not a full 4 yard out. It actually cuts. Like you stop and you actually run the route, but you essentially just kind of hook it around and you wait for the ball, right? It's like a very common, it's in everybody's playbook, and it's the most boring play in everybody's playbook is stick. Oh, it's whatever. Okay. We're just trying to get an easy 5 yards. And so when a defensive back sees stick, he wants to play to the outside of it. He wants to get to the outside of it. He knows that the ball is going there, so he's going to try to cut it off, jump the route, pick six it. He's having dreams of grandeur. So you cut it back inside. So you make it look like it's stick, and then you cut it back inside. So they call it stick, and then the cut back inside for the McVay world, Shanahan world, is called China. So it's called stick China. You do that the other way around, by the way, where you look like you're going to run a drag across the field, and then you turn it around. Drag China. There you go. And with flag is a concept with stick China underneath and then a corner over it. So it is kind of looking like it's going to be that same high-low, and then you cut it underneath and you get it. Both of these are probably top 5, top 10 most common play calls in the Vikings. They are staple pass concepts. And it goes into the kind of the theme that I've been saying, which is when the Vikings do their normal stuff, that's when they're at their best. Both of those plays that Addison scored touchdowns on are very much Vikings normal stuff. Like pillar of their offense. They call these 3 or 4 times a game kind of passing concepts. Natalie asks, how do you evaluate Hawkinson's reinsertion into the offense? I expected more involvement based off of Oliver and Munt's usage before he came back, but he seemed quiet. So he's been doing great. That's where I'll start this. But the reason he hasn't got as many yards is because the Vikings ran out of yards to give, man. Like that's what it is. They kept hitting 50-yard go balls to Jordan Addison. And while Hawkinson was also open underneath, I don't think any of us want Sam Darnold to go be throwing that. I will say as a blocker, Hawkinson had an up and down day against the Falcons, and Oliver and Munt have still done more of the blocking. So like on run plays and stuff, they've taken Hawkinson off the field, but it keeps him fresh, and that's okay. especially because he was been coming off the knee thing, and so they're being cautious with him as well. And I think that pitch count thing has sort of gone less and less and less every week. But man, if you needed him against the Falcons, he was there. They just they just beat him with only Jefferson and Addison because the Falcons had a weird defensive strategy. I don't have time to get into it. That'll be tomorrow. But let's move on for now to Greg Lewis, toe tapping finesse. Fantastic. Who says, out of the current NFC playoff teams, which teams do you think the Vikings match up best against and worst against? It's hard for me not to say the Rams is the worst because that's the team that beat them. But obviously, like, I do think the Thursday night West Coast coming off of a physical Lions game, I think all that stuff played into it. And I do like watching the Rams tape felt like they were just a worse team than every other game. Just, oh man, it was an off night. And I feel like another crack at the Rams won't go that bad, at least on the defensive side of the ball. Offense, I thought did okay, right? They ended up with 20? And they were driving down the field on that face mask thing. So it's okay. But I probably have to say that I think the more physical coverage teams, like I actually think the Cardinals are a pretty bad matchup for the Vikings. They are not looking great for playoff position, which is good. I wonder about the Bucks. I don't know a lot about where the Bucks are at now. I know where they were supposed to be, but I also know they're banged up, and we're not going to play them this year, so I haven't paid too much attention to them. But that's a likely candidate for the Vikings. If they win the NFC South, that might be where the Vikings end up going if they stay in the 5th seed. And then obviously the Lions and Packers are very interesting matchups. But I think because of the divisionalness of it all, I think like there's not really a rock, paper, scissors to that. You guys get to know each other too well, and it's too complicated to be able to say like it's a good or a bad matchup. It's a divisional one. It's a weird matchup. It always is, no matter who you are. Jake Bieber asks, during the first offensive drive for the Falcons, 2 chunk plays happened where they threw over top Van Ginkel and Turner as they dropped into coverage. Is this something other teams can look to exploit? Okay, you're going to get me going now. So ideally, no. And the point of drafting someone like Turner is that he's actually pretty good at that. So I don't think that it's something that can be exploited a lot. I mean, everybody's going to give up completion now and then, but I think Turner and Van Ginkel both in coverage give you what a regular off-ball linebacker can give you. And they actually just put those guys at regular off-ball linebacker sometimes. Like they trust them to do that stuff. So to be a good zone drop, first off, you need to open your hips the right way. That's usually instructed in the coverage, but that's something that you can mess up and like give up something, right? The Vikings got Jalen Naylor on a deep one against the 49ers because a 49ers defender made exactly that mistake. He opened up his hips the wrong way, and that was curtains. But it's also, it's like precision in where you land yourself. So you open up you come off the line of scrimmage. You're a big guy. You got to kind of hustle to get out there. And then you're supposed to get, old school, it was get to the hash mark or get to a certain landmark on the field. Now it's sort of relate to a route. But you got your eyes on the 1 or the 2 or like one of the receivers. And if that thing goes in, then you go cut that route off wherever it is. You just go cut it off. And for my money, Dallas Turner's really good at that for a D lineman and has grown in that a lot this year. And I think getting better and better and better in that has helped justify getting him on the field more and more and more. And Van Ginkel's been able to do that forever, and that's why Flores likes him so much. So I don't think that that's something other teams can exploit. I think that's something that they look at in the film room and go, oh, okay, you got to change this about the way you do your hook drops. But I don't think it's as much of a weakness in the defense as it was last year, I guess, is one way to put it. Cho asks, what do you think of the now very common rebuttal to criticism of a take, learn ball or watch ball? Because to me, it translates to I'm right because I say I'm right. If watching learn ball would help me agree with your take, prove it. Otherwise, you're just being lazy. I think you have a point here. He says, not talking about you specifically, but I'm probably guilty of this where, I will say something, whether it's online or on the show or something that is like research that I've spent a lot of time. I've sat down, I've watched, I've tried to put together something, and then somebody will come in and like put a box score in my face. It's like, oh, come on, dude. This is so far beyond what a box score can tell you. And I hope that Locked On Vikings is more than what a box score. The whole point of me doing this show is to get you more than what you can get by Googling the game on ESPN.com. or going to the link on ESPN.com. And if I say something like, well, I don't think Sam Darnold had that good of a game, and you go, but he had 250 yards. It's like, I clearly know that. But I do think that, sometimes people can get like dismissive about it or whatever. I think for me, it's really hard to respond to some overly simplistic retort to something that has so very clearly already adjusted for that. If I say something like, Jordan Addison is good, and you go, God, but he only has 650 yards. Like, I know. Or 700, I think he just crossed 700. But it's like, I know, but I don't care. And maybe saying, hey, you should maybe try to like turn on the game and watch it and then see what you see is a better way to learn. But of course, hey, look, it's online. You're probably talking about a Twitter interaction, and people get short with you on Twitter. It's how it goes. Last one I'm going to do comes from Skolger1998, who asks, everybody has their classic heartbreak Vikings memory and the Minneapolis Miracle as their best memory. What is your classic heartbreak memory and favorite memory if you can't choose the Minneapolis Miracle? So if I can't choose the Minneapolis Miracle, which is obviously what I would choose, I am going to go with 2004 Lambeau Randy Moss Moon game. And I'm not just saying that because that's what Mike Tice said about the same question at halftime or at some point during the game on Sunday. And the reason is, so I was with my dad for that one. We were in his basement, and I remember it so very vividly that we walked into that game thinking we were going to get punked. Vikings were the 6th seed. They were 8-8. They were kind of whatever. They were up and down. They were totally in a free fall at the end of that season. Randy Moss walked off the field. They backed into the playoffs. You had Mike Tice doing the beep, beep, beep. Like, it was so clear that that Vikings team was supposed to be one and done. And that was the team that kind of taught me, hey, look, you enter that game, you can win it. And I will never, ever call another team, a guaranteed one and done again in my life. Because they not only beat Brett Favre's Packers at the peak of their power, they cooked them. They crushed them. That game was over before the fourth quarter started. And you had the Randy Moss Moon thing. I thought it was awesome. Okay, I was 12 years old. That was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I didn't even know the context of it until years and years and years later about like the Packers fans mooning and stuff. I loved that one. And in terms of the classic heartbreaks, probably 2009. I was 17 years old. Ask me when I have more time to tell you the story of awkward times as a 17-year-old watching the Vikings or watching the Saints in the Super Bowl after that game and still healing. But that was formative emotionally to me. That is a formative time in a young boy's life to get their heart absolutely stomped on by their football team. And that is probably as all in on a football team as I ever have been and ever will be. I guess until it became my job to be all in on them, then I guess, but that feels different. That doesn't count the same. I will talk to you all tomorrow. We're going to try to get Pete Bursich back on the show. See if that scheduling works out. Obviously that's never a guarantee, but I would love to bring that to you, but whatever it is, I will see you tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit of ball. Love you. And as always, Skol.